Good evening and welcome to Speakers Corner UK. We are back with another part review this time of a recent Muslim stream called Islam or Atheism, which leads to happiness. And this was, I think, a couple of days ago. I think it was on a Sunday, as it looks like there. So we're going to do a part review there. And as always, joining me is my co-host, Stop Spamming. Good evening, sir. How are you keeping?
Well, hi guys, how's everybody doing? Stay away from Corona.
Indeed. So just to put it in context, we're going to do a part review here. It's a shorter one. We'll see how long it takes. We may well have one of our regular Muslim panelists from the Gin and Tonic joining us. He might give a different perspective on this. So we'll see how that goes. It's not so long, but again, if we're going to dive into certain parts, you never know how long it will take us as we go through. So this starts with an atheist. His name in the stream is Hassan, Isan, Hassan. I think the original name is Hassan, Hassan. He's been on other streams as well. And so his view is that atheism can lead to happiness, and there's some studies there. And now he's going to interact with Shabir Yusuf. For those of you who followed our channel, you'll know that we're quite critical of Shabir Yusuf. So we're going to see, I have watched this already. Stops has not watched this. So we're going to go through this segment, which lasts about 18 minutes in terms of the recorded length on the stream, but it may well take us a good hour and a half, depends how deep we go into this. And again, if we have a Muslim guest, then that might take us a little longer as well. So with that said, Stops.
Hello to the people watching. Welcome to another critique. If you have questions, just go one enter to catch our attention. Then you can put a question or something. Just as a quick answer, for me, the question: does atheism or does Islam or anything for that matter lead to happiness? Well, no, not really. Because you can be a miserable atheist and you can be a miserable Muslim. It's not automatically the case that when you are a Muslim that you're happy, or whether you're an atheist, you're happy. No, a lot of people cannot handle being without a God. They need a God to get through the day. So they're never going to be happy when they are not believing in a God. And we have to appreciate that. So not everybody can handle it. And so the question is actually moot. It's just that it depends what you're comfortable with. Whether you want to accept it, because there's a lot of people who are Muslims without actually believing that they're just going through the moves. Then you're a miserable person right off the bat. So those are the different aspects to this kind of a question.
Yeah, and along with what Stop said, I think happiness is self-reported anyway. If there are some criteria, I mean, if we were doing this in any sort of scientific way, we'd have to establish what the criteria are, see if we can get agreement on these criteria that lead to happiness, and then we can go out and do a scientific study. But a lot of this is self-reported. So they're going to people and say, how happy are you? There's sort of levels of happiness as well. And so there'll be a sliding scale. Some people might be ecstatic. And the other thing to remember, and it's something that I picked up from sort of David Benneter, who's one of the big proponents of antinatalism, the view that you shouldn't bring new sentient life into existence, is that many people over-report their happiness. In other words, they are not entirely accurate. If they had to look back at a life, let's say not their own, but somebody else's, and somebody else looked back at theirs, if you could objectively look at somebody else's life, you'd very likely see that we're not as happy as we think we are. And so we as humans are cherry-picking the level of happiness, and it's completely subjective and self-reported. So to me, I sort of agree with Stops that it's not a particularly valuable question, because anybody can claim some sort of happiness, and there's no sort of objective criteria. And welcome to SmartCat. He's joined us as well. So good evening to you. How are you, sir?
Good morning, good evening. How are you, gentlemen?
Very, very good. It is evening over here, certainly for me over here in the UK, and wherever Stops is, I'm not sure what it is for him, and I guess it is for you earlier in the day. I think you're over on the US side of the map.
Yes, I'm across the Atlantic.
Yeah. Good evening. So it's the first time that we'll be doing it with SmartCat. It's also, like I say, a shorter segment, although we'll see how we get on. And so SmartCat, you haven't done one of these before. We're going to run through, and I'll share screen, and we're going to run through a segment of a stream. And this is an interaction with an atheist and a Muslim called Shabir Yusuf. And as we go through, we're going to start and stop, and we're going to comment. And obviously, you can give your comments. You either agree with us or not, and give your reasons why. And we'll see how far we get. in terms of being able to finish this segment of about 17 minutes. I foresee that it'll take us at least an hour and a half, maybe longer. But that's just my, having had streams in the past, I think that's kind of where we're going to go. So I'll start it. I'll share screen. I'll start it. Hopefully you'll all be able to hear it because I've added in the audio. The viewers, they will be listening in as well, and they might have some comments that we might highlight as we go through as well. So if you are a viewer and you've got some thoughts, maybe we've missed something, maybe you want to add something, put that in, and between myself and Stops, we'll see the comments and we'll add them in, whether it's something that agrees with us or disagrees, we can still add that comment as well. So you're happy with that, Smart Cat? And then we'll just go ahead, and then if you've got something you want to say, just you or Stops will just say stop, and I will stop it, and then we can comment at whatever point during the segment. I'll be stopping regularly on my end, but I've got control, so you guys need to shout it out to me to stop.
Yeah, no problem. Can you guys give me a feedback on my audio mic? Is it good?
Yeah, you're coming through fine to me. How's it sound to you, Stops?
The usual tin can.
Yeah, it's perfectly audible here, so that's all good. All right, so without further ado, otherwise this will take us forever, let me bring up this video. Here it is. Let's go to full screen so people can see it nice and clearly. So we're 43 minutes into this. Again, you can find the original in the description of this video, so go and find that if you want to. You can go through that and see it from the beginning. This is a part way in, and this was a request from one of our sort of, I'd say subscribers to a degree, but one of our Discord members as well. So let's get started, and here we go.
Worry, be happy.
Sorry, brother. I just heard my dear handsome brother Abbas say that Isan, brother, you are a doctor. Is that correct?
Yes.
Oh, okay, brother.
Yes.
The title of the stream is obviously which leads to happiness, atheism or Islam. Now, the position of the Muslim is very clear, that a creator gave us guidance, and we adopt that guidance in our daily lives. And as the Quran very clearly confirms, and maybe a brother has already mentioned it, the Quran clearly confirms how you obtain peace and contentment. Obviously, definitions of the words happiness, peace, contentment have to be established. But we have a clear route from start to finish.
Okay, so just a couple of quick things here. Just a welcome to Hassan. He's in the chat as well. So he's the gentleman that is, in fact, on recording here. He's got the brown J. He's listening in the side chat there, or at least has put a text in. Welcome, Hassan. Hopefully you'll find this of interest as well. So Shabir sets up two things here. One is, obviously, he says it's in the Quran, and we need to establish a basis for happiness. Now, I have watched this section, and at no point does he actually establish this to my recollection. Now, I could be wrong. He may well give a basis, but that's something that's important. If you're going to say, let's establish a basis, then you're going to start with that. And I would imagine somebody like Shabir will say, okay, Hassan, let's, before we go on, talk about happiness, let's establish what that is. Because if we can't agree, if one person says happiness is, beating everybody that he can see within eyesight to a pulp, and the other person says trying to help everybody that you can find around you, then you're going to have a disagreement off the bat. So if you're going to start with that assessment, then obviously it would be helpful if you can, in fact, provide that. And all he said is he's appealed to the Quran, but as we often know, and Smart Cat is welcome to disagree, by the way, we've got a Muslim with us, so he might have a different view. The Quran isn't clear on what happiness is. And so it's all very well to say happiness, but we do need to know what it is.
The only comment I would the only comment I would like to add as a Muslim is that, from my perspective, arguing whether atheism or Islam leads to happiness is a very subjective quagmire. I mean, depending on the personality you argue with, it can lead to nowhere very quickly, right? Because of the subjectivity and the clip balls. So I mean, personally, if I were to do da'wah, I wouldn't frame any argumentation in this light. But maybe he has a system behind why he wants to frame it. Maybe he wants to prove some doctrinal points or dogmatic points. So I just wait and have to see and withhold my opinion up until this moment. But me personally, I wouldn't engage anybody with a subjective argumentation.
Yeah, and interestingly, that's what Stops and I have said, right? It's self-reported, and to the degree that you might be able to establish some sort of science, you'd have to agree on what the scientific criteria is that would lead to happiness. And prior to this segment, Hassan did bring up some criteria that was disputed with Shabir and I think somebody else there. But again, one would have to agree on that criteria. And in this case, most of it is self-reported. And as Stops has quite rightly pointed out, anybody could claim that they are happy because of something in their life. So it is very subjective. But I think it's you quite rightly pointed out, so did Stops, and I think most people, it's not Islam or atheism. It's not one or the other. It can be both, or indeed many other things can give you happiness. Christianity, Hinduism, polytheism, whatever it might be, right? Scientology, whatever it is. It doesn't go to the truth of the statement. And if you go watch the stream from the very beginning, Shabir sort of says, well, that's a knee-jerk reaction. I think that's one of the most important things to say. He dismisses it as in like it's not so important. But to me, I care about what is true or likely to be true, and hopefully most of us do. And whether something gives you happiness doesn't establish whether it's true. And so the question, as you pointed out, and so did Stops, of being happiness is a very tangential, secondary, third-hand point that, I could agree that maybe, more religious people are happy, but that doesn't tell me whether it's true. And if it's self-reported, then it's not that particularly interesting or substantive to me. And so I agree with you. I wouldn't go and, even if it were the case that there were more atheists who were happy or whatever the case is, I wouldn't be using that as a criteria to try and get people to agree that atheism is true, or indeed Islam is true.
And Alhamdulillah, atheists and Muslims can agree on something.
Yeah. All right, let's see what he says now and see if he brings up something here.
Now, for the atheist, please tell me if I'm wrong in any way here, but it is like saying ours is not how and why. We are mere atoms and we will die. Do you subscribe to that?
Okay, I mean, obviously you got your, religious views.
No. Sorry, Hassan. I do apologize. I'm going to interject. I've asked you a question.
Yeah,
do you subscribe to this? Go ahead.
If you're an atheist, then you're not convinced by the evidence of God. So most likely, yes, it's true that you just there is no supernatural. So we're all biological organisms. Yes.
Okay. I mean, look, it may sound like I'm coming back to it, but to be honest with you, Hassan, you were trying to respectfully squirm out of what I just asked you. I'm going to ask you again. No, not a problem.
Rob, just hang on. I just want to make a point here. This is, it's cringeworthy. Like the, I can feel the hairs on the back of my neck coming up. This is so terrible. This is so primitive, because Shabir is dogmatic. Okay, he's hooked on this bunch or whatever clot of molecules or atoms or whatever, because he associates something with that, and it's his private association. And if somebody corrects him and says, well, actually this is a sentient being that is being made up out of the atoms, that is something different than a stone that is being made up of atoms. And Shabir does not know, he cannot process this. For him, a stone is the same as a human being unless it has been given a soul by his God. And he cannot comprehend that there is a difference, that there is more nuance here. It's not only just a bunch of atoms. It depends what the bunch of atoms make. If I have just like a grain of sand or salt or whatever, it is very different than having a complex brain. Just because atoms are involved, everything is made of atoms. So it depends what these atoms, how they are formed, how they are put together and composed. The end result is what is important, and not the individual components. And Shabir simply does not understand it. This is why he's trying to push his view onto somebody else, because he doesn't understand what the other person is actually trying to say.
Well,
yeah, I think go on.
One thing I wanted to add is I'm not too sure what is this Shabir speaking to X, Y, and Z? Is that
yes.
To Hassan? Yeah,
the center on the bottom? Okay, he's speaking to Hassan.
With a J, with a brown J on it.
Okay, well, no problem. So whether he's a car salesman, an insurance broker, or a person trying to make a compelling argument, I haven't heard anything in delivery or substance to what is being said. So I don't really know where this argument is going, because I know Hassan said a few things and there was an immediate rebuttal, an interjection, but I don't know what this rebuttal or interjection is solicited by. So I'm kind of misunderstanding the
Okay. Well, let me just play this a little bit more, because he's going to repeat the question. We'll stop it directly after the question, and we'll ask it. Stops has pretty much answered it. I want to add something, but I want the question to come out again, A, so that you can hear it, and B, so that the viewers can hear it again, because he's going to ask that question again. So let's listen here quickly.
Okay. Ours is not how and why. We are mere atoms and we will die.
Ours is not how and why. We are mere atoms and we will die. That's a statement, and he's framing it as a question, and he's asking Hassan, do you agree with that? My view is I don't agree with that. We're not mere atoms. We are, I think he said mere atoms. We are not just atoms. We have the potential for more. And in fact, that's clearly obvious. We are an arrangement of atoms. But by that standard, everything that we are aware of in this world that's a concrete object is an instantiation of atoms. The difference between us and a rock, for example, because that comes up a little bit later on, is that we have consciousness, we have a nervous system, that there's something different about the arrangement of atoms that we have than a rock has. And that gives rise to what is often called emergent properties. So the emergent property of consciousness, for example, etc. And a rock doesn't possess that. And so this unique conglomeration of atoms is not mere atoms. What he will do is try and go down to the molecular level, but that molecular level with these atoms, they have a potential in a certain configuration to give rise to something that is unique and very different to other things like rocks, or indeed even lower quality animals. And so this reductionist type view, Rob, I don't agree with that.
Well, here's the thing, Rob. I'm trying to discern from which argumentation that he's trying to enter. What dogma is he trying to put up, and what point he's trying to make? When he makes the statement that we are made out of atoms and we will die, it seems like an affirmation of a truth. So he's presenting it as a dogma, but I'm trying to understand where is he getting the part that we are made out of atoms. Because I think the Quran or classical Islamic scholars would affirm we are made out of material of some point, but dying it's something that conscious sentient beings experience. For example, if you destroy a rock, you wouldn't be able to say, you wouldn't be able to say that the rock died. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, Smart Cat, let me jump in. I think you might not have got the whole picture here. He's putting this to the atheist. So we're not at the moment talking about the Quran. He's putting this to the atheist and asking the atheist, do you agree with the statement that we are mere atoms? And you will see very shortly why he does this. There's a reason why he does this. Because he wants to try and point out what he thinks is an inconsistency within atheism.
Yeah. Well, what I'm saying is, from the perspective of a Muslim, I wouldn't agree to this as well, because only sentient beings experience this death and rebirth cycle, or whatever you want to call it. I wouldn't attribute it to a sun, the atoms of a sun, or the atoms of a bridge, or the atoms of a rock, because these things, I think, from an Islamic perspective, do not experience death because they are material substances, right? So I don't understand where he's coming from, that things are made out of atoms and we will die, or they will die. Is he talking about annihilation? So I don't really know where he's trying to get at,
okay. Smart Cat, let me say it again. He is saying that, hey, this is what, do you atheists agree that this is what is the case under your worldview? This has got, at the moment, nothing to do with Islam, in the sense he's putting the question to the atheists. So don't think about the Quran, don't think about your worldview. He's putting this to the atheist and asking the atheist, do you agree with this statement? Because the atheist,
it sounds like an affirmation of a dogmatic principle, and he's asking, do you agree or disagree with this?
Yes,
so
that's right.
So it sounds like he's trying to persecute his own statements. So it sounds like he's setting up a straw man to me, if that's the case,
No, there's no straw man here yet. Yeah, there's no straw man. Well, you could say that it's potentially a straw man of an atheist view, but then that's what's under discussion. I don't agree with that statement, and I think I've given a reason why I don't agree with that. And I actually thought about it just before we came on the stream, and I could give an analogy, because if it's the case that if the potential for something to give rise to something else means that it's different, then that conglomeration of atoms does have some emergent properties or potential emergent properties that does make it different. And if the Muslim push back and go, no, I'm not going to accept that all matter out there is just atoms, then the problem with that is then they've got to reject the potential for anything coming into existence being any different from something else. And what I mean by that specifically is, like, the example I would use is the beginning of the universe. Because they always say to us, Muslims often say to us, well, something can't come from nothing. But if you look at Lawrence Krauss, and I had his book up and I was just reading it a few moments ago before we started, that nothing, his version of nothing is the absence of matter and space, time, and matter, but it has the potential to give rise to something. Now, if a Muslim is going to argue, no, well, that's not really nothing, then they've got to be consistent and say, well, okay, in this case, then if it gives a potential, then that conglomeration of atoms is different. And if so, what I would put to Shabir, but it's quite a nuanced thing, and I maybe haven't articulated as well as I could because I was thinking about it just before the show. Now, I would try and put that argument as a reductio, in other words, put it against Shabir and say, okay, do you agree with the statement? If you agree that nothingness, as defined by Lawrence Krauss, is nothing, and that out of that, the potential to give rise to something is indeed possible and in fact probable, then that's fine. Then you're being consistent, but then you can't have the argument that something can't come out of nothing. Now, if you're going to argue against that, then you can't use this reductionist position against the atheist. But I'd have to explain that a bit better so that he can't get out of it. But I suspect that it probably wouldn't work with him. But at this stage, it's a very reductionist view. And he's asking Hassan, do you agree with us? Because he wants to present what he thinks is a moral argument based on whether Hassan accepts this proposition or not.
Okay, now I get a better understanding. And another thing, this is 40 minutes into the stream. So I'm thinking that this is how if this is how an individual begins the conversation, I thought it would be very odd. So obviously, there's context that is missing, so I'm going to let these two gentlemen elaborate, and if I see something that I would like to talk about, I will interject. But
no. Smart Cat, no. This is the beginning of the conversation. They have different people on this stream, and this is the beginning of the conversation.
Okay, that's still valid information, because I'm thinking, like, how do you begin a conversation like this? So I'm just thinking, like,
okay. Let's get through it. Otherwise,
and we're not going to. The other thing, I just want to point out something quickly, because what Shabir is completely missing here is that he is asking, it's not what and how and what we live and what we die and so on. He's already using the word die, which is exactly what Rob was pointing out just now. It takes a very specific combination of atoms for them to die. Not every atom or combination or molecule or something can die. A rock does not die. So he is already contradicting himself by limiting it to a certain mixture of atoms in a very specific way.
Do you subscribe to that?
We will die, yes. We're all going to die. I've never doubted that.
Okay. I'm going to ask you one final time.
I don't believe in an afterlife. No, I don't believe in afterlife. So when we die,
okay, Isan, ours is not how and why. We are mere atoms and we will die. Do you subscribe to that whole thing that I'm saying?
I've said it already. Yes, we're all atoms, and when we die, we will cease to be living organisms, but our atoms will probably carry on in different forms.
Okay, so if I'm merely an atom and the arrangements of the atoms have allowed me to go and rape somebody, what is wrong with that?
Okay, so now do you see the point, right? The point is that these are just mere atoms. What's wrong with one set of atoms, quote unquote, raping or quote unquote interacting with another set of atoms? By his lights, there's no problem with this. How could you possibly say that's wrong? That's the critique he's leveling.
Yeah, that is why if he would ask me, or if you were to ask me, do you agree with me? I would immediately say, no, I do not agree with you, because you're putting in the word mere. I don't see it as a mere heap or whatever mixture of atoms. No, that is not correct. It is very, very specific. It is very limited in that it is only valid for organic life forms. So I would definitely not agree. But I think Hassan is not used to the dishonesty of these people.
Well, that's against somebody else's morals, or against our morals. Sorry,
Hassan. Sorry.
Okay, the other thing that'll happen here, just so you know, I don't know what's happening. Maybe Shabir's got a bee in his bonnet. He will incessantly interrupt Hassan through this entire thing, right? Normally there's a back and forth and he sort of keeps quieter, but he's going to interrupt now incessantly. It's almost like Hassan won't really be able to get his thought out clearly in the beginning. So just be aware of it. He's going to be interrupting a lot here. I was like, what's going on here? Did he have coffee just before he started or something? I'm not entirely sure.
Sorry, son, I do apologize. I'm going to cut you. I said the mere arrangement of atoms, and obviously atoms will precede any kind of moral standing, yes, because they are at the very core of any being or anything else, rocks and stones. So if the mere arrangement of atoms has led me to rape somebody, what is wrong with that?
Well, I mean, I've already had a long chat about morality, and
no, I'm asking you. I'm
answering you. I'm answering you.
Okay, go ahead.
So
go ahead.
We are all an arrangement of atoms. That's true. But as an evolved higher species, we have ability to think. We can empathize. We can know what activity causes other people's harm, and so we know what to avoid and what to do. So that's
okay.
It's not just a case of I'm not going to treat somebody else as another. In the same way that I would treat a rock or something, because I've got empathy, which is what happens when you're an advanced evolved species.
Excellent, Dr. Isan. There's only one problem with what you have just said. If I now have the ability to fully appreciate and understand that I'm only a mere arrangement of atoms, and as such, whatever action I undertake is purely based on my atomic arrangement, is there any problem with that?
I think he's just said no. Oh, he said, yes, there's a problem with it. I mean, I don't think there's any atheist alive. I've never met one who's going to go, yeah, there's no problem with that. Obviously, they're not going to accept this. So this, continuing to press this point as if he's making a substantial argument here is really silly. Now, if the argument is, okay, why are you not mere atoms? Then I think I've given a reason, because this quote unquote mere atoms, I don't agree that we're mere atoms, that these atoms, when configured in a certain way, give rise to what we call humans. We have empathy, we can suffer, we can feel pain, and based on that, we can derive our morality. And most humans agree on many of those things. Where we disagree, that's where the real discussion comes in. But appealing to a God, which unfortunately never gets done in this stream, he will never have to defend his position. I think at one point, Hassan does ask him a question and he sidesteps it entirely, which is kind of par for the course with Shabir. He doesn't answer questions, but he'll press them here. It doesn't help you appealing the other way. But I think I've given one, and there might be other, even better answers that atheists could give. But no atheist is going to go, hey, we're just a mere arrangement of atoms, and therefore there's nothing wrong with this atoms interacting with that atoms in a particular way, right? This is a very uncharitable reductionist view, and I've given a reason why I do not accept that, and they shouldn't be doing that. I could give the same reductionist view against Islam. You've got a celestial dictator that just wants to have slaves. Now, how many Muslims are going to go, yeah, I appeal to that, yep. Maybe there is one, actually. It's always possible. They're going to go, well, that's uncharitable. That's not what we believe, and this is clearly not what an atheist believes. And Hassan is attempting to, or has attempted to give him a reason here, kind of similar to me in a way as to why this is not mere atoms, and there is a reason why it's wrong. And he's either not understanding this or not accepting this.
Rob, the one thing now I kind of understand where it's going about. I felt like it was a very roundabout way of framing the argumentation. I mean, it's they have their provocative in how they want to do it. I don't understand the agenda, but I assume that this is a da'wah and outreach program that, try to get people to discuss and formulate different opinions, challenge. It's okay, but I mean, it's a very roundabout way, because he's trying to challenge the morality of atheism. And Muslims and theists and many people who subscribe to religions can make extremely compelling arguments about where do we get our morality, but I just don't understand why begin with atoms merely die, and so let's talk about morality if that's what they were trying to get into.
Well, the reason he wants to do that, Smart Cat, is because if it's mere atoms,
yeah.
Can you hear me? The reason he's saying this is because if it's mere atoms, then there is no morality according to him. And what he really wants to get an atheist to admit, which I don't think there's any atheist, well, maybe there would be one or two, I don't know, maybe a moral nihilist or something like that. But it's very unlikely that he's going to get an atheist to admit, well, hey, there's no morals and anybody can just do anything. Right? No atheist. But that's kind of the line that he's trying to press. If you're just atoms, well, then there's nothing wrong with rape, because it's just atoms interacting, right? And of course, like I say, virtually no atheist is going to accept that.
Yeah, because atheists don't want to be dictated to by religious establishments or God, but they don't want to cede the moral ground. So this is a dilemma that atheists have to struggle with, and I understand that dilemma. They have to look for different argumentation outside of a God paradigm to justify their moral actions, and that's understandable. But I still don't. I like, to me, this is you begin the argumentation with a nonsensical argument, affirmation, sorry, and then you attack your own affirmation. I mean, this is a very roundabout way to open the subject about morality without God. I mean, there's many ways you can enter it, but I mean, it was extremely confusing from my perspective. But now I understand it, and even that I don't agree with the delivery, but the argumentation fundamentally, if it was framed better, it's very difficult for atheists to escape this problem. And I think it would have been better to begin it that way, because at the end of the day, this is something that atheists do have to.
Okay, so let's just check in then. Because this is important, and okay, it's going to take a little longer, but we've only got about 11 minutes left of this anyway, I think, of this particular thing. But you think that there's a problem for atheists. Can you elucidate what you think the problem is that atheists have? Because you're not alone. Obviously, these Muslims do as well. I don't think that we have a problem. So it depends what you mean by a problem, and then we'll see whether it affects you as well.
Well,
so
how
what
do you have
the problem is?
How do you have an objective morality and a subjective, existence? Everything is subjective according, right? So,
okay, some atheists, and there was somebody that put a chat in here, right? You can be a physicalist, i.e., that everything's physical, and a moral. Well, you can be a moral anti-realist in this case, but there are moral realists. So typically, moral realists are people that think that there are facts of the matter that are objective, i.e., that it doesn't depend on a mind. I'm not of that view, but I do think that the majority of atheists are of that view. I just haven't heard a compelling argument that would persuade me. I was originally of that view from the sort of Sam Harris line, but I think there's obviously better philosophical arguments than that. I've just not been persuaded myself. But I'm going to ask you, if you say that something's objective, then I'm going to ask you, Smart Cat, or indeed any other Muslim, what does it mean to be objective? Do you mean by objective that it's a fact of the matter independent of minds?
No, I wouldn't define objectivity in that such manner, because I would define objectivity as something that remains the same throughout time, right? So that's when it comes to morality, at the very least. Like if it was wrong.
So is it a fact? Do you think that a moral is a fact of the matter? So something like a rock. A rock is a rock, whether there's human minds to accept it or not. There's a fact of the matter that conglomeration of atoms is a rock, whatever the label is. It's something that's lying there on the ground in a particular shape, right? That's a fact of the matter. Do you think that morals are like that rock, that they remain the same, i.e., and they are independent of minds? It's just a case of reality that something called morals exists. Is that what you think?
Well, we're going to the point where language breaks down if we enter into that realm of argumentation. Like at some point we have to agree that there's understandings between two people. So, like, I mean, I could tell you that a tree is a rock and a rock is a tree, and it's logical in my own head. But once I start interacting with other people, then we have a problem. So there's a level of consensus in understanding what we're talking about. So if we go that far, I think language breaks down, and then it becomes a subjective-objective mishmash. And I don't want to get there.
All right, let's leave it there for now. We could always talk about it maybe at the end if we have time. Otherwise, we get bogged down. I'm just thinking about it. It's probably not good to do it now anyway. I don't think atheists have a problem, and it depends what you mean by objective. Now, if a theist could establish a fact of the matter that was a fact of the matter, that we ought to follow, that the fact-value distinction can be reconciled under theism, then I would agree you have got a position that might be superior, at least to the subjectivist view. However, I don't think that any theist can do that, so that's a moot point. But I think let's carry on here, because otherwise we lose the thread of this now. So Hassan has given a reason. Shabir has asked the question again. Let's see where they go from here.
Show empathy. So, I mean, if I asked you...
No. Why should I be... No. Sorry, Hassan. Why should an atom show empathy?
Notice what happens there. Now it becomes an atom, right? Firstly, it's mere atoms. Now it's a even further reductionist view to an atom. Now, of course, no atom is going to show empathy, but nobody's claiming that. So now he's strawmanning the position that he originally put to the atheist, because there's no atom. Nobody's going to agree that there's single atoms.
Notice that he immediately stops any kind of questioning.
Yes,
because Hassan
that's
tried
the other
to ask him
side.
something.
Yes, he wanted to respond back and ask him a question. And of course, he just interjected and talked over him. I said to you, he's going to do it a lot here, unfortunately, in this particular view. And I think he's been sort of buoyed up, if I can use that term. In other words, he's on a crest of a wave because all of these other Muslims have said he's had this mic drop moment. So I think there's been an ego boost here. He's now come in to kind of show that he's the guy, right? And if you look at some of the comments, just keep an eye on the comments. They were telling you how wonderful this is. If you ask the Muslims in the chat here, what was it that was wonderful that he actually said here, and why do you believe it's true? Or indeed, if you're a Muslim watching, if you can provide even a substantial reason for why you think it's true, that would be worth hearing. I don't think there will be many that can do that.
An atom doesn't show empathy because an atom is just
excellent. And mere arrangement of atoms. Sorry, Hassan.
Listen now. Now it becomes a mere arrangement of atoms again. Can you see the equivocation between an atom, which Hassan rightly said doesn't have empathy, but now it suddenly becomes a mere? Can you see the sophistry that goes on this jump between an atom and mere atoms? First, he strawmans his own position. Hassan then accepts that an atom doesn't have empathy, but then he uses the word mere atoms and slips that in and says, "Oh well, mere atoms don't have empathy."
But
a mere collection.
Rob, I just have to. I mean, is this how I would say? Is this how people communicate with one another? I mean, obviously,
Yep.
Really. I mean, if you're trying to drive a point, is this you turn it into some kind of like one man upsmanship between like I made this point, I made that point. To me, this is a futile endeavor. I mean, what fruits will it yield? I mean,
okay, excellent that you are picking this up, because yes, on SC Dawa, EF Dawa, Hamza's Den, and all these, that is exactly what happens, nothing else. But it's wonderful that you are picking this up without being prompted or guided or goaded in any way. You picked this up all by yourself, just by listening. Yeah.
No, because whether I'm a Muslim or an atheist or a Christian, I would not subject myself to this type of silliness. This is silliness of the highest caliber. I just don't understand the argumentation. Why begin with a straw man affirmation and then attack your own position? Like I suspected that was going to be the case from the very beginning. Yeah, I don't. And then we watched the video and it turns out to be the same thing. Theists have many good arguments to make. This is just painful to watch. I'm somewhat shocked that this stuff actually goes down on the internet, and I think people need to ask themselves some serious questions of why
this
are
is
they
how it runs,
participating in
Smart Cat. So, as Stop said, welcome to some, not all, but some of the Muslim channels. These sort of Dawah channels, this is a propaganda exercise. This is not about intellectual honesty and having a charitable approach where two interlocutors with different views can explore those views in a charitable and interesting way where they're really paying attention to what each other is saying. These particular channels are here to do Dawah in a propagandist way, right? So they have 3 or 4 Muslims or more against one atheist or whatever the case is, and it's to be uncharitable and disingenuous as possible because they know the followers here will just lap this up because the followers can't really follow these more nuanced arguments anyway.
Look, I mean, just beginning with we're all made out of atoms and therefore we die. There's a huge gap. I mean, there's a huge gap. I would never accept that statement as an affirmation. It kind of sounds like dogma, and I don't even know what I'm accepting at that point, So, like I said earlier, only conscious, sentient beings experience death. I wouldn't attribute atoms dying to the same thing as humans dying, or even a cat dying, or even as an insect dying. So, there's lots of, false notions being thrown around and attacked, and I wouldn't participate in this, and I wouldn't be so as a Muslim, I wouldn't participate in this type of da'wah missions, if you want to call them that. Because it's embarrassing and it's here forever. Remember, once you upload it to the internet, it's here forever, and that's it. And whether I was an atheist or a Christian or a Muslim, I would not subject myself to. If I was a Muslim, I would not subject myself to a panel of 6 Christians criticizing and not giving me the a fair shot to argue, to articulate my position. So there's many things that are going wrong here that I want to say.
Sorry to jump in, Smart Cat.
Yeah,
I understand your position. Let's carry on. Otherwise, it will take a long time. You're not happy with the approach here. We are not either. I mean, obviously, if you agree with a certain position, you can highlight it. But I think you've made it clear that you're not happy with the sort of approach that the Muslims are taking here. So I think we're in agreement with that. And maybe it's at the end, depending on how much time we've got, we can talk further about what you and I, or me and Stops and you disagree with, and we see if we can have a more nuanced and intellectually honest conversation than I think what's happening here. The point of this review, at least for us, is to highlight the way that these particular Muslims attempt to argue and the tactics they invoke in order to propagate the propaganda that's being done here, which is that atheism in this case is irrational. He'll make that claim at the very end. He will never defend that in any way, or he will attempt to through this method here, which I think we'll quickly break down and show doesn't actually work. But it's really to highlight the tactics that have been involved in these particular streams so that people that go on are more aware of it. Now, Hassan is quite aware of that, so he will know that. And anybody who's been following this channel will know it, because we've done plenty of reviews where we slow it down, break it down, and show what's going on. So let's see if we can carry on here. We've got about, I think, 11 minutes left of this, so we'll see how long that takes.
Of atoms, should they show empathy?
If it's a collection of atoms that's an evolved species, then yes.
1 second. We haven't defined an evolved species. Respectfully, and I'm going to take a few minutes here.
If it's a highly evolved,
Isan, calm down.
Okay, just listen to this disingenuousness. Right? Hassan is entirely calm. He's interjecting. He's getting emotional and then telling Hassan to calm down. Hassan made a very good point that if these atoms are an evolved species, which we are, and that's the atheist position, then to just reject that position, then you're not speaking to an atheist. Then you are being intellectually dishonest. Now, if you want to make the case that in fact atheists don't believe in or don't have or are not entitled to say that we're evolved being, then what's the argument for that? But you can see here, he's the one getting excited. And as we've seen before, that they will use this tactic. It's almost like looking in the mirror. There's probably a good fallacy name for it, where you are doing exactly what you accuse the other person of. I'm sure somebody in the chat will bring it up for us. But it's like a mirror image type fallacy here where, hey, calm down. He's the one jumping in all the time. And Hassan is entirely calm, and he's given a very good response here.
Look, but if it's an arrangement of atoms like a rock, then it's not going to.
Okay, so you are making a distinction between a living entity and a rock.
Yes.
Okay. What's the difference in the arrangement of atoms? Sorry, 1 second. What's the difference in the arrangement of atoms between a living entity and a rock?
Do you really want me to explain that to you? Yeah. Okay.
No. It's very simple. What's the difference?
The difference between a living organism and a rock is that at
the atomic level. At the atomic level.
Notice how he now tries to force it. Now he shifts the goalpost at the atomic level. But we can even go with that, right? I don't remember what Hassan said, but I would say at the atomic level that a particular, the atoms that comprise a human at the atomic level have the potential to give rise to emergent properties such as consciousness and emotions. The configuration of these atoms at, quote, the atomic level don't have the potential to do that for a rock. That's my argument.
Rob, this is extremely silly. To say that atoms are responsible for consciousness or morality or feelings or whatever we subjectively present, this is absurd. Atoms is a physical, the science of atoms and quantum physics is the science of how the physical realm interacts with one another and how it's structured. It has nothing to do with consciousness. This is very silly, and I don't understand how this argument is even lasting as long as it is.
Oh, well, let's carry on, and it might become more clear as we go through here.
At the atomic level, it's just a case. It's still the same chemical bonds and the physical forces holding them together. But when you take into account the greater complexity between them, then you can see that you have power of empathy. You have people understanding, be able to relate to other people.
Dr. Sam,
so if you
look,
I think Shabir Yusuf.
Okay, so I think Hassan has basically said in different words kind of what I've said. There's a greater complexity with humans, and so those at the mere atomic level give rise to this sort of a human which has these properties that a rock doesn't have. And notice again, he's incessantly trying to interrupt him here. So Hassan cannot get the point out clearly and completely, such that then somebody can respond back. So like I said, I don't know if he had coffee or he's on something else here, but he's like an Energizer bunny who's telling Hassan, originally to calm down, but he's here interjecting incessantly, and it's pretty poor form.
I have to ask you a question. Do you think that consciousness comes from interactions of atoms?
Yes, of course.
Well, yeah, obviously from interactions of brain atoms. Yeah, of course. Where else would it come from?
All right. We can talk about that later.
Yeah, we'll talk about that at the end. If you can tell me where consciousness comes from, and if you don't think it's an emergent property of the brain, I'd like you to explain where you think it comes from. We can talk about that at the end.
Yourself, with all respect, I think you're an arrangement of atoms, just like I am. I don't see you any more or less than me.
That's what we need.
I see a rock.
Yeah, right. From your perspective. Excellent. From your perspective, I totally agree on an arrangement of atoms, and my atoms being the superior element as opposed to my higher level evolved understanding, decided to commit an act of rape. Do you agree?
Okay, so that was a bit of gibberish there.
What did you say?
Yeah. So that's a bit of Shabir gibberish. Basically, if we try and break that down into something that's coherent, these evolved atoms decided to commit rape. Is there a problem with it? Hassan has multiple times said, yes, there's a problem, right? Trying to reframe it and ask the same question again and again is just going to get you the same answer. And Hassan has already answered this question. So this is kind of a moot point here. He's trying to flog a dead horse. The term meaning, the question has been asked and answered, but you keep asking the question again, slightly changing the question, and the answer is going to be the same. Now, if you don't agree with Hassan's point, then make an argument, but don't keep asking the same question in a slightly different way over and over.
But he's just trying a Shabir shuffle. All he's trying to do is make a statement and have the other one prove that it's wrong.
Yeah, and of course, he doesn't answer any questions himself, right? Because Hassan did try to put a question to him, and he just sort of didn't even acknowledge it at all.
Sorry, can you repeat that point?
It's the same one that I just said, but in a different way.
Sorry.
Thank you very much. It's the same one that I've just said in a different way. And Hassan has answered it. Why would you ask the question again? If you have a problem with Hassan's answer, then make an argument against it. Don't keep asking the same question in a different way. That shows that you're disingenuous, because it means that you don't actually have an argument against his response to you, and you think that just repeating the question multiple times is somehow substantive. It isn't.
Okay, but Rob, there's one thing that I need to point out here as a suggestion for Hassan as well. If you get into the nitty-gritty of this, it's futile, it's frustrating, it's everything. Stop for a moment, take a step back and say, listen, I want you now to formulate a complete argument. Because what he's doing is he's throwing out little sound bites and sort of baiting you with these things to jump and nibble at these things, and then he can catch you. Just take a step back and say, look, whatever it is, just give me your complete argument. What is it that you are proposing? What is it that you are saying, what the actions are, and what is the result of the whole thing? Now we can talk about this. And then he's got a problem, because he can't. All he can do is throw out these little bits and pieces and hope that you're going to bite.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Let's go again.
Sure
not a problem at all, Doctor. You said that you look at me and I'm merely an arrangement of atoms like you are. So I said to you, excellent, I can agree from your perspective as far as that angle is concerned. I'm merely an arrangement of atoms. And the atoms, because they precede this idea of, a higher level of evolution to the extent that we empathize, yes? Because if we were to make if we were to make a distinction between the two, you will have to agree with me that the atoms preceded this evolution and reasoning element. And if that be the case, the primal instinct of the atoms took...
Sorry, you want to say something, Stops?
This is word salad. There's nothing coherent coming out of this mouth. This is just noise.
Yeah, it's kind of it is a bit of a word salad, and you can hear him trying to think as he speaks as well. Because I know him, the way the sentences are formed, it might bypass a lot of people, but I've kind of got a history with him, so I know, right? When I'm speaking now, it's not like I have to think about the next few words I'm going to use, but you can see there's like minuscule pauses here where he's trying to formulate some sort of response in some coherent way, and it's becoming a bit of a mishmash of words here. But he also uses ambiguous language on purpose. Part of the reason for this, in my humble experience, and I've had a fair amount of experience, is to confuse the interlocutor. And if you look at other videos with him interlocutors do get confused because ambiguous language does confuse the mind. There is a particular purpose behind doing this, certainly in therapy and so forth. But here, you shouldn't be doing that if you want an intellectually honest conversation. But if you want to confuse an interlocutor, then using this sort of mishmash of language can be confusing. And I can see why an interlocutor would be confused. But then, if you wanted to have a proper conversation, you would avoid doing this. He does this as a matter of fact, and he does it consciously.
Me over and I committed an act of rape. Do you disagree?
I disagree because there's no evidence of primal instinct of atoms. All that atoms do is bond and perform chemical and physical reactions. Whereas,
thank you.
What's your? Of course, it's something more complicated.
Atoms can't even rape. What the
have-
fuck is your problem?
So
the neurons and functions of the brains.
Right. Okay.
Can I just say to you? Can I just ask you?
No. Just before you do that.
Okay, can you see here? It's just like incessant. He hasn't heard the answer there. Part of what Hassan was repeating again was overridden by Shabir attempting to interject again. He said to him at the chemical bond level, there's nothing going on. But when you get to a more evolved level of these atoms, i.e. these atoms clump together in a human form, now that what you said about the atoms at the molecular bond level doesn't apply at the bigger level or at the higher or the evolved, I think was the word that Hassan used. But that, of course, wasn't even heard, or if it was heard, it's been completely ignored because he was talking over Hassan at this point. And so really the argument needs to be formulated. Okay, I've given you there's this complex set of molecules or atoms, if you like, that are evolved, an evolved being. And at this point, now we can say something is wrong. Do you agree or disagree with that, Shabir? And if you disagree, why do you disagree? Right now, because you've got to make it clear, because he's talking over him all the time here. So he's not hearing the entire thing. And he is trying to ask him a question back, but you can see again now it's just being overridden and the interruption is incessant now. So he's obviously, at no point does he want to answer any question here.
Just before you do that, I don't respectfully.
The other thing, by the way, because I can't even hear Hassan now, the other thing that I think is useful, if you're going to go on these streams, make sure, somehow test it, do it with somebody else, make sure your mic is loud. Because if your mic is a little softer like Hassan here and their mics are loud, they're just going to drown you out, incessantly interrupting you. So you've got to go there and make sure you've got a very strong mic, or if you, wherever you are, make sure that you can shout if you need to, because otherwise you're just going to get bulldozed over here with them not listening to you and talking loudly in the mic.
Not at all. I've asked you only one question, and no matter which way you have gone, I brought it back. And I'm going to ask you, based on what you have said, and I just followed your reasoning, because I made my stance very clear that as a Muslim, I take the guidance of the Quran in totality, and it tells me where I go. Okay, but from the atheist perspective, I asked you.
Okay, but again, right? He won't allow Hassan to challenge that, because there's a lot you can challenge about that particular statement. But it's like said in passing, and then a question is going to be tagged on the end here, so he doesn't have to ever respond to anything. Just notice that's also happening. I'll throw that little bit in for the Muslims who are listening, and they'll all go, yeah, that's exactly what the Quran says. But now I would stop and say, okay, let's talk about that. You made that assertion. I don't accept that assertion. What's the argument for that? What do you mean by this? And what's the argument? But he doesn't have to defend that, because he's now on the attack, if you like, where he's asking the question. So he can make these little statements, then tag a question on, and he never has to be challenged. And we've said it in many other streams. These guys are not challenged strongly enough, because they use this technique of bulldozing over their opponent, asking them, or just ignoring questions, especially if there's 3 or 4 of them.
You, ours is not how and why. We are mere atoms and we will die. You accepted that. You said yes. I said the arrangement of atoms that I have compelled me to commit an act of rape. Do you agree? You have tried your best not to say yes, despite knowing that the actual answer is yes.
Okay, so that is intellectually dishonest. He made a very specific point that he believes at the atomic level, just atoms floating about on their own, that's true. But when you put these atoms together and they become a more evolved being, which he said at least 2, maybe 3 times, that's no longer the case. And Shabir is either didn't hear this because he was incessantly interrupting, or he's ignored it and he's now being intellectually dishonest and suggesting that because he agreed that at bonding level, he's not able to then make an argument for a human being, which is a collection of evolved atoms by Hassan's view.
And the other thing, you can easily say, look, atoms can't rape, all right? So what you're already doing is you are implying that there is some sort of a sentient rearrangement of the atoms here. But the other thing that I would do here, if I'm asked a question like this, you can always turn it around as well. If you're asked this, you can easily say, okay, do you think that rape is wrong? Where do you get this from? Okay, the Quran
but they
doesn't
won't
say
allow
that rape
that, right?
is wrong. Yeah, but you see, this is what I'm saying. You need to beat their tactics, because it's exactly what you are saying. They're beating and beating and beating, pushing. The only way that you're going to get out of it is just to duck, turn around, and then slam them. And that's what you have to do. You have to go and you have to say to them, okay, well, where do you get this from? Why is rape wrong? The Quran doesn't say it. Where do you get this from? That's what you need to do, but because you need to beat their tactics.
However, I will be a bit flexible with you, Doctor, and I will ask you this. I made it very clear to you, what is the difference between the arrangement of atoms of a rock and the arrangement of atoms in a living entity? What is the difference? If you are going to tell me, well, we are...
Do you want to say something?
No, I'm just saying everything is different. Everything.
Yeah, sorry. When I hear you speaking, I think you want me to stop.
No, I'm sorry. I'm just interjecting one word.
Something else other than the arrangement of atoms, then I want you to tell me, okay, you know what, Shabir, you are absolutely correct. Rocks are composed of atoms and molecules.
Yeah.
Human beings are composed of atoms and molecules, but there seems to be a very, very distinct difference. And I'm sure you will agree with that.
That's what he did.
Okay, well, if you agree with it, you're saying that he agrees with it. So now you're actually agreeing with his argument that when it gets to the level of evolvedness, i.e. by Hassan's light, now there's something different. So you are now agreeing with him. Thank you very much, Shabir. You've actually put a point against your own position here. Because when these atoms or when these molecules come together in a specific way, they have certain properties that make them more evolved, make them different to a rock. So after all of this, you are now actually agreeing with Hassan.
Excellent. 1 second. Right. That's fine. Right. Excellent. But if I follow your logical reasoning to its conclusion, you can't deny me the right and the ability to state in no uncertain terms to you, I have evolved to such an extent that I know that it is actually only my atoms rearranged in a particular way that allows me to commit acts. And in this instance, an act of rape. Mine is a higher level of evolution. Do you disagree?
Again, this is sort of gibberish, right? Higher than what? What on earth are you talking about? Hassan has made the point seemingly abundantly clear to everybody else who's paying attention here. It's like the other Muslims are all hypnotized, right? They're not saying anything. They're probably not even paying attention, and they've been hypnotized as well as everybody in the chat. For some reason, the chat isn't moving here, so that isn't helpful. We can't see anything going on there. But this is a line of gibberish now. There's nothing of substance that's actually being said here.
Did you see the comments that came up that they highlighted?
Yeah, I saw a comment there, but I was more listening to
Shabir is the boss. I mean, this guy's a joke, right? Not a boss. But this is what Muslims say. This is what they're going to highlight. Shabir is the boss.
Evolution in a rock, yes.
No, I didn't say that. Dr. Isan, I don't know whether it's just selective hearing or what, but
the irony of him saying to Hassan that it's selective hearing. The irony of that is just so palpable that it's inescapable. Him saying that Hassan has got selective hearing when he's the guy doing it. This is the level of Muslim apologist that Hassan has to interact with here. Somebody that's so completely unaware that they are doing exactly what they claim the other person is doing.
I'm asking you in such simple English, respectfully, I mean this. I asked you very clearly that I am in a position where, now I'll slow down here. I have a superior evolved understanding of life to the extent that I know now that it is merely an arrangement of my atoms that have allowed me to commit certain acts. And in this instance, it was rape. Do you disagree?
Okay, so he claims that he's now evolved and he's got a higher level and he's recognizing that it's just a mere arrangement of atoms that's doing this. Does he agree? My response immediately is, what's the argument for that? What's your argument that you are more highly evolved to recognize that we're mere atoms? I'm claiming that I'm more highly evolved to recognize that we are not mere atoms. And I can give you a reason why. Can you provide an argument why it's more highly evolved to just think of us as atoms? Because I don't accept the premise of your question, sir. And if you're not prepared to make an argument, I will dismiss that question as poorly phrased or poorly presented. And therefore, there's no question that needs to be answered there. So if you don't present an argument, I'm rejecting the premise of the question outright at the beginning.
If you have the evolved ability to empathize and act, then you should know what you'd be able to understand what the consequences of your actions are.
Exactly.
So you'll be able to. It's not your primeval.
Shut up.
Oh, right. So you do accept about a primeval element. Okay. Let me just ask you this, Doctor. What do you specialize?
All the atoms do is just arrange. They follow their own processes. But when you have something that's more highly intellectual, which is a composition such as the brain, then it's much more different. I could say to you, do you ever look at a Ferrari and think, "Oh, that's a beautiful car"?
Respectfully, Doctor.
Can you look at a Ferrari? No, just answer my question. Do you look at a Ferrari and think that's a beautiful car?
Are you asking me personally?
You can notice now when a question is posed to him, it's like the brain kind of comes to a complete screeching halt. It's like, this is a straightforward question, right? He's asking him essentially like an aesthetic question. If you look at a car, do you think it's a beautiful thing? Pointing out that, hey, this is a subjective view of this arrangement of molecules, and you have some view about this. It's not a mere arrangement of molecules. It's formed in a certain way, and you have a specific response to that. So to compare, let's say, a car with a rock would also not be just an arrangement of molecules, even from the human perspective.
Yes, asking you personally, yeah.
Maybe it depends. It depends on the color.
Okay, well, if you melted that down,
it's a shame Hassan didn't go with the color, and it's a shame there that because he says now that you melt it down, right? He's going to say now, what happens if you melt it down? It would have been good as well to ask, okay, so what's your favorite color? He might have said yellow. Do you think that a yellow Ferrari is beautiful or whatever, right? What you really want to do is get him to say yes, he does agree that a car is beautiful. And that's really just to point out that there are different arrangements of atoms that have different properties. In this case, it's maybe just aesthetic, but in the case of humans, it's a lot more than just aesthetic. Because what Hassan, I hope, is trying to show is that it's not just mere arrangements of atoms and they're all just the same. That's his point. That's what Shabir is trying to do, is to show that these are all mere atoms, and hey, atoms just interacting with others. Nobody can say that's wrong. But nobody accepts that as an atheist, or almost nobody that I'm aware of accepts that. And so all we need to do is show that there is a difference in certain molecules or certain conglomerations of atoms, which I think Hassan has done, but he's been talked over multiple times. And then the argument doesn't follow through, right? Because then you can make the argument that when these atoms are together in a special way, there is a problem with rape. If it were two rocks that were interacting with each other, we wouldn't say that's a problem. Obviously, we wouldn't even categorize it as rape. It would just be two rocks falling on each other, rolling over each other, whatever the case is. But there's a specific difference about humans, and that's what Hassan has repeatedly attempted to explain here. And either Shabir doesn't understand it, or he doesn't care, and he's just interrupting him incessantly.
And the thing is that we've lost our Muslim, unfortunately. I don't know what happened. Maybe he got bored.
Maybe he'll come back again. So smart cat, if you're listening.
One thing I just realized is that this is actually quite powerful, what people are doing. And that is, I'm making a statement which is totally ridiculous and then asking afterwards, do you disagree? Now, you need to go and formulate the reason why it is that you disagree, where he has not even had to in any way articulate why it is that he comes to that conclusion, why he makes that statement. And that is so powerful. We need to, I don't know, I haven't found a way yet of how to actually combat this and what the response would be for that. But I've just picked it up now that this is actually quite strong.
Mm-hmm.
Just left with a lump of metal, aren't you? So
if you melted a human down, what are you left with?
You melted the human, you're just left with the elements. But I can appreciate that.
Yeah, sorry. What elements? What elements? Dr. Hassan, what elements?
This is terrible. This is so terrible that this guy cannot give him 2 seconds of answering and immediately pounces again. I think you're right. There's some sort of boosting going on here where he's got this false sense of supremacy, and he doesn't even realize what an idiot he's being, just because other people are egging him on with this mic drop. And this is totally silly.
Yeah.
Even a human is melted down.
Well, you've got calcium in the bones, you've got iron that's mainly in the blood.
And go even lower, go even lower, go even lower.
What? These are atoms. So
what will be? Sorry, what was that? Did you say atoms?
I'm answering to you. Yeah, it's the atom. So
Dr. Isan, so you are finally agreeing.
Can you see the disingenuousness and the tactics that are being used here? He didn't disagree in the beginning that just the atoms on their own are just atoms. What he suggests, and what I agree with, is when you put them together in a certain way, they are no longer merely atoms. They give rise to emergent properties, and that makes this conglomeration of atoms, which is a terribly reductionist view anyway, that no atheist will accept, something that is not just mere atoms. So he can agree that when a human melts, or whatever the case is, or whatever then it just becomes atoms. Then those emergent properties are no longer there. They vanish along with it, which is a strong argument that they come from the body anyway, unless you want to make the claim that you have the afterlife or some sort of soul. But then the burden, of course, is on you to demonstrate that, and no theist has, and that's why they don't even attempt, or at least these guys won't even attempt to do that.
Dr. Hassan, can I ask you, what do you specialize in?
How's that relevant? Going off on a tangent here.
Lots of things. I do
which
lots of
particular medical?
Well, I'm saying
no. It is Hassan. It is very relevant. Should I tell you why? Because it's been nearly 10 minutes, and you have at all costs avoided a simple answer to my question. Now you have just, unfortunately, Hassan, calm down.
Okay, calm down again. I mean, okay, this guy is just a dishonest interlocutor now of the highest order, and if you don't see this, or if you disagree, put in why you don't see. He's just overridden him again. He's told him to calm down when he's the guy that incessantly interrupting. Hassan is calm and quiet. He wants to actually respond and give a response, unless of course all Shabir wants to do here is preach to the gullible audience. Maybe Hassan should just mute himself and say, hey Shabir, have a conversation with yourself, because it seems like you don't want to actually have a conversation with me, telling me to calm down when you're the one who seems to be on some sort of drug, or maybe you've had a high strong cup of coffee, like you're hyper, like take the Duracell batteries out, maybe recharge for a moment here. But telling me that I need to calm down, he's entirely calm to me. It's the exact opposite here.
You just used the example of the Ferrari, and you said if you melt it down. So I said, okay, melt a human being down. And I know from our current understanding, we will come down to the subatomic particles, atoms, etc.
Yes.
So indirectly, Hassan, without you even having realized it, but you have totally agreed with me that my superior...
This is his buzzword. You've agreed with me. He forgets that, of course, he agreed with Hassan about 5 or 6 or 7 minutes ago, that in fact there was a difference between humans and rocks. And Hassan was quite happy, as are we, to accept that at a molecular, subatomic level, there's just molecules floating about. It's when they come together in certain conglomerations that makes it different, and that gives us the ability to say that rape is wrong.
Here, evolved brain has led me to the understanding that I am merely an arrangement of atoms, and because the atoms precede... I'm so glad. Well, in that case, you are agreeing with me that the rape that was undertaken was as a result of the atomic...
I just want to say, did he say he's agreeing, or did he disagree with that? I didn't hear... Let me just go back just a few seconds there. I just want to hear that bit again, whether he agrees with this, because his mic is much softer and Shabir is just talking non-stop.
No, he agrees with that. This is not the bone of contention here. It's just he does not agree that the atoms are going to rape.
And go even lower, go even lower. Go even lower.
Oh, shit.
These are atoms. So
what will be? Sorry, what was that? Did you say atoms?
I'm answering to you. Yeah, it's the atoms. So
Dr. Hassan, so you are finally agreeing. Dr. Hassan, can I ask you, what do you specialize in?
Oh, sorry, I must have gone too far back there.
Yeah.
Which indirectly, Hassan, without you even having realized it, but you have totally agreed with me that my superior evolved brain has led me to the understanding that I am merely an arrangement of atoms, and because the atoms precede... I'm so glad. Well, in that case, you are agreeing with me that the rate that...
Okay, so I think Hassan is looking at this slightly different. He's just looking at it at the atomic level, and Shabir thinks that he's agreeing that at every level it's just atoms.
He
So
doesn't
that might
understand
also
it.
be what's going on. I would have disagreed at this point, but then I might be thinking on a slightly different track to Hassan. I would have said, no, I don't think that's the case when we are in this evolved state. If you're talking about just at the atomic non-evolved state, i.e. that there's just atoms, at the melted state or whatever you want to term it, that's fine. But I'm not talking about that at the human state. And if I'm saying that the human state is different, then I can say rape is wrong.
One guy saying
was
the
undertaken was as a
atoms
result of
made me do it. One guy saying the atoms made me do it, and the other guy saying the atoms have nothing to do with it.
No. The one guy is saying it is down to the atoms that are doing it because the atheist doesn't believe in a soul, doesn't believe in the spiritual and supernatural. That is why the atheist is saying only the atoms are responsible. So what is the problem? What is the point of this? Whereas the atheist is saying, no, this is not the case because atoms cannot rape. It is the consciousness that makes people do that. It is not the atoms because atoms are arranged in a rock, in a tree, and a brain. Yeah, but they are very. Yeah, but what you said is the opposite way around.
No, I'm just saying one guy is saying the atoms made me do it, and the other guy is saying no, the atoms are not responsible for making you do it. That's what the argument is.
He's not saying the atoms made me do it. He is saying, why is it wrong if atoms go and get raped or raped? There's nothing wrong with atoms doing that.
Yeah, because he's trying to argue that, if the atoms are responsible, so I am not responsible for my actions.
Who's saying that?
No, he's saying he is attributing consciousness to atoms, which of course doesn't work. And this is why he thinks he's catching the atheist out, because he is saying, well, it's the atoms, and you only think it's atoms. So if it's only atoms, why do you object to this? There's no reason to do that if you don't have a soul.
So this is very silly, huh?
Well, I agree that Shabir's line of questioning is silly and it's dishonest because Hassan has made a point. He hasn't actually responded to Hassan's argument at all. He keeps trying to bring it back to the atomic level, which Hassan has agreed with. But once those atoms get together in a certain way, then they no longer have the same properties as when they were separate atoms. And Shabir hasn't in any way dealt with that part of it. He's in fact entirely ignored that. Although he did at one point early on say that there is a difference between humans and rocks, even from the atheist point of view.
Has anybody found the consciousness molecule?
No, who says that it's a molecule?
Well, if it's an atom interacting with atoms, you can isolate it. It must be a molecule.
No, it's not.
It's silly, man. It's silly. It's silly.
Let's do it at the end. We've got about 2 minutes left.
I've just got one question. Do you think that an idea is something that is irrelevant or is outside of the brain?
I don't know how to answer that. I mean,
okay, thank you.
Can you isolate the idea as a molecule?
Exactly, you can't.
Exactly.
Of the atomic arrangement.
No, because if you're
you confused yourself.
You've got the ability. No,
Hassan, I am telling you, I'm even higher than you. To the extent that I know. No. You think that. Look, I want you to demolish what I'm saying or disagree. I'm saying to you, if I follow your line of reasoning to its conclusion, I am telling you now that if I am an evolved species, I am saying to you very clearly, and you, despite trying to deny it, have to agree with me, that I have reached a superior understanding, more so than you, to the extent that I know that I'm merely an arrangement of atoms, and as such, that particular arrangement has led me to commit an act of rape.
So all we have to ask is, what's the argument that if you have reached a higher level, I don't accept. I think you've reached a lower level, but you've made the claim that you have a higher level. What's your argument for that? Because just claiming that you've reached a higher level, I'm not going to accept. So what's required here actually is an argument. Now, that's something that Shabir never gives. He likes to give assertions here, and then he wants you to challenge his assertions. And again, this is something we've got to remind ourselves, and Muslims do this a lot. They make assertions, and they want you to challenge them instead of making an argument and giving us a reason, because an argument is, here's my premises and a conclusion, roughly speaking, and here's why I think it's true. Now we have something potentially substantive on the table that we can discuss. If I just said, well, there's no God, and somebody says, why do you say that? And I say, well, just challenge it. They are in their entirely right to say to me, no, hang on a moment. You said there's no God. Why do you believe that? I don't have to tell you why there is a God. You've made a claim there isn't a God. Please provide a reason. And that's exactly what he's done here.
Rob, is it fair to say that this sample size of Muslims is representative of Muslims in general?
No.
What sample size?
We see here on the panel.
Oh, I don't know about that. I mean, I would say that it's, in my anecdotal experience of maybe 400 or 500 Muslims, it probably is a reasonable. The majority of Muslims do think this way, but that's again my anecdotal experience from, I would say, about 500. I'd say at least 350, 400 do think exactly like this or very similar to this. I'm not saying all of them do, but that's my anecdotal. Have we polled the whole world? No.
Okay, my experience is very different. But then I'm used to Muslims in a Muslim country, and they're very different. And it doesn't matter whether it's Iran or whether it's Pakistan or whether it's, I don't know, UAE or whatever. The people, the individuals are much more reasonable and much more clued up than these guys, these panelists.
Then stops. You know that these guys are considered the outcasts if they were in the Muslim majority country, right?
No, not exactly. No, this is the funny thing. Are you going to go to these guys and are you going to go to Shabir and tell him, listen, you're an idiot?
Me personally? No, why would I? I don't know him that way.
Well, you see, this is the problem, and this is why it doesn't happen, because you've still got this codex that you're not supposed to be criticizing another Muslim, and that is why it's happening. Even though I'm sure that some of these guys think that this Shabir is actually a bully, but they're not going to say anything. You get Sabur nodding along, and that is it. And Abbas is a bobblehead anyway. So they're not going to criticize one another and say, Shabir, listen, calm down, relax a bit, give him a chance to answer. It's very rare. You do see it occasionally. Yes, we have seen it, but it's very rare.
You can't disagree with that, can you?
The individual is...
Thank you, Dr. Isan. Thank you. We can move on. Thank you.
Okay, this is just steamrolling of the highest order, but we are used to this. Stops and I see a lot of this going on. He tried to respond. He took a moment to think about it, and he just said thank you when he attempted to respond, as if he'd made some substantive point. And sadly, the gullible audience here will think that he said something substantial. But if you go and ask them, that's why I always say, go and ask Muslims, right? Go and ask them, what was it that was a mic drop moment, and why do you think it's the case? And then you wait to hear, and the response, if there is one, will tell you everything you need to know. When I've asked this, I get gibberish or I get nothing at all. I never get anybody, or almost never. I can't actually remember a time when somebody's come along and said, hey, here's the argument I made, and here's why I agree with it. They just nod along. They're as hypnotized as the rest of the panelists here. He hasn't made a good argument here at all. And he hasn't even engaged with Hassan's main argument, which is that when atoms, quote unquote, get into an evolved state, that they therefore have certain properties about them. And say, I'm using my words, not his. And therefore we can say rape is wrong.
I don't think you understand the self-respect.
I just wanted to make a small announcement. Hamza cannot make it. He's had some internet issues. So.
I think that's the end of it there. I think actually there might be a few more seconds. Let me just check if there's anything more that he gets to say here.
So apologies to everyone who's watching live right now. I want to move on to.
Okay, so he's not going to get any more. So I think we'll stop the screen share there. And we've got some time, depends how much time, Stops and SmartCafe, and maybe we can discuss a couple of the points that we went into there, and maybe towards the end here's a kind of a bonus for people who are listening, because SmartCafe does think that presumably that there's at least some arguments in favor of this, either morality or whatever the case is, or consciousness, and those are interesting topics, and hopefully we can have a slightly better discussion. But before we get to that, I just want to hear sort of closing statements for this part of it, because we won't do it right at the end. Let's do it now while we finish this part of the stream, and then we'll do kind of the bonus session with the three of us having a discussion, if you guys are up for that.
Yeah, sure.
So SmartCat, I don't know how much you heard of all of this, but just give us your thoughts either on Hassan or Shabir, their arguments. What did you think of this? The Stops and I will do the same, and then we can go into have a discussion amongst us if you're still there.
Yeah, Yeah, well, I think you guys know my opinion about these things. I don't know who put these gentlemen in charge and as representatives of the haqq. I don't know who put them in charge, and their intentions are good, but I think they in some cases they are doing quite a bit of harm. This stuff is on YouTube forever unless they take down these videos. I mean, some of it is fairly embarrassing, and they really need to analyze their strategies and what they're trying to achieve. Because if they're trying to get people to, consider Islam at the very least and its argumentations, it needs to be seriously. Their strategy needs to be seriously reconsidered, because it was extremely painful for me as a Muslim to watch this, and even as a person who thinks. I like to think of myself as a free thinker. It's very. I wouldn't want to stop in the middle of the street and have a conversation with Hassan or Shabir. How about that? I'll tell you that, because I mean it's just going the wrong way, and that's all I have to say about it.
All right, stops.
No, I think it's pitiful, right? It demonstrates how useless the Islamic apologetics really is. There's no real argument, there's no real point, there's no real logical consistency, there's nothing there. It's just a bunch of claims, shouting, and then cutting anything off that goes the other way.
So stops. I have to just interrupt you with all due respect. These gentlemen are not apologists. You actually have to go to school and study apologetics. And that's usually a Christian field. I mean, Muslims don't really have apologetics in a formal situation where they can actually really understand the argumentation. These guys are freelance da'wah guys, and they're embarrassing themselves and embarrassing people who call themselves Muslim, including me, because their argumentation is weak and their strategy is not good, and they really need to reconsider what they say. Christian apologists really take the time in their argumentation. These guys cannot even be compared to Christian apologists.
I'm not doing that. I take your point. It's just that I am going and calling everybody an apologist who goes and defends a specific ideology or position. This is what I call apologetics. So I think Muslim apologetics in general is very weak. And what we see here is exactly this, that they don't have an argument. They don't even know how to formulate a complete argument. And this is something that we need to learn as well, to hold their feet to the fire and say, listen, bring me your complete argument, and then we will go and inspect it. Don't go for these little bits and pieces, these baiting snippets. Don't fall for it. And the other thing is that if you have somebody like Shabir, who really has no clue about anything, don't fall for these little tricks. Go and study what these people are doing in their. Look at the tactics these people come up with when they are in people's or in the discussion with other people. And see what they're trying to do. Like, how many times did I see today that this Shabir Shuffle attempt at turning the tables and saying, well, here's this, now you go and defend the position. How many times have I seen this today? It's endless. So we need to point these things out and show people how to handle this and how to, in some way, respond and make them understand, no, it's not going to work like that. Your tactics are no longer going to function here. You need to think of something else. And especially with people like Hamza, especially like with people with this Shabir guy, we just need to go and tell them, look, here's what I expect from you. If you want an answer from me, you need to be able to formulate a straight question and not like this. So for me, this is like a demonstration of desperation and weakness and real inept, I don't know, just talking and incompetence in trying to get anything across. That's all.
Yeah, I think, again, certainly for me, we've had a look at some of the tactics here in this particular case by this Shabir character. That, in my view, definitely doesn't want to have an intellectually honest conversation, never at any point addressed the main part of Hassan's response, kept trying to bring it back to the same thing, thinking if he repeated the question multiple times and I don't even know if he heard it or if he just decided he didn't understand it. I think that's entirely plausible. I don't think that he's particularly nuanced in the discussion or can follow some of these. I've seen many times his faulty reasoning, and other Muslims don't reason as poorly as this. So I'm not saying all Muslims do, and I've experienced Muslims that wouldn't, go down some of these terrible lines. I mean, he's got other sort of views which we could talk about later on, but in terms of this particular stream, I think Hassan gave a view. It was never actually challenged. It was ignored or sidestepped or just steamrolled over. And what we got here was this idea of a reductionist view, and that you can't actually, molecules, there's nothing wrong with molecules, just raping molecules, or if you like, interacting with it. And that's what you atheists have got. Now, no atheist will accept that, this. But again, you can tell that this is not sophisticated, right? Sophisticated theists don't do this. If you listen to people who are better studied, who understand this better, they will be as charitable as they can. They'll still challenge atheism, and that's fine, but they won't go to these low levels. And so you can see there's a difference. And when you do a little bit more of this, as we have, and I'm by no means the best in the world, there's many people that are way better than maybe myself and Stops or Smart Cat out there. You'll start to see the patterns, and you'll notice people that make more nuanced, more intelligent, more knowledgeable arguments. This was certainly not one of them. But again, remember that this appeals to, in my view, and certainly what we've seen in the comments, at least are some illustration of that. If it's not everybody, it's certainly some level of those Muslims who are watching. It appeals to those sort of Muslims who either can't or won't think more nuancedly, and it's, that's what it appeals to. As long as Shabir sounds like he knows what he's talking about, even if there's a bit of gibberish in there, even if he misrepresents the other person, even if he never addresses the other person's argument, or indeed allows himself to be critiqued, they will still call it a win. I mean, he could have literally said gobbledygook most of the time, even though he said it some of the time. He could have said it most of the time, and they would still have been saying how wonderful he was. And this just tells us about the gullibility.
How dare you? How dare you say I cannot follow these guys blindly? How dare you say that? You're offending my freedom of religion by saying I can't follow these guys blindly.
Well, hopefully you won't, but others would do, and that's the people that he's appealing to. Obviously, you may not be one of those, of course, but you can see in the comments there. So the comments have at least some representation. It may not be all of them. That's fine. But I think, again, we've just seen on display here what happens. These are propaganda streams. And so maybe for Hassan, we have to go in a bit stronger with these sort of things. We have to hold their feet to the fire and get them to respond, because what they will do is they'll jump in with each other. They'll override it. And then you when you're on there, I guess it's under pressure. I've been on there once as well, some time back. But it's, again, the more you go on, the better you become, the more you interact with Muslims or anybody else for that matter, the more you see this happen and the more experienced you are. But don't get derailed or go off on a separate tangent, because they start asking questions. Different people fire different things. They ignore what you say, and it's a case of holding their feet to the fire as well. I don't mind answering questions, but when I hear that the response coming back is not addressing my question, at that point, I'm not going to continue answering questions. Now I'm going to get you, and I've said, hey, I've answered your question. What's your response to that? You haven't said anything about that. You're going back to that point. I've answered it with this. Respond to this. So I think it's again just us all learning that we can respond better to this low level of argumentation.
Hey, I got a few questions for you.
All right, I think we're done with our closing statements. So we'll have a bit of a bonus session for a little while. Yeah, we'll see how we go, maybe half an hour or something like that. So yeah, you go ahead. You can ask myself for Stops, and then maybe we can talk about morality and or consciousness.
Okay. When it comes to science, two things are of the utmost importance: experiments and instruments to measure experiments. Would you guys say that's a fair, very simplistic assessment of what science fundamentally is?
No.
Okay, no problem. What would work for you guys?
No, you have to include the whole concept. You have to include critical thinking. You have to include the concept of being able to question everything and anything. And you have to go and you have to include the fact that everything is based on data and the demonstration of the claims.
Fair enough. I don't reject any of those. We can add that in the science part.
All right.
Okay. So what I'm trying to say is that when we want to determine if something is observable, we use scientific method and experimentation and instruments to measure experiments and said whatever, right?
Correct, yeah.
Have we ever been successful in measuring consciousness in a tangible way, or done experiments to demonstrate levels of consciousness?
Yes.
Okay. would these experiments work under the parameters of what I had just said?
Yes.
Like I just brought forward. Okay, so what I'm trying to say is that consciousness is observable, right?
Yes.
So you would attribute consciousness to originate from interactions of chemicals and atoms.
Yes.
Okay, not a problem. But we cannot isolate it as a molecule or a reaction or whatever. No. So where is it? Is it physically observable, or are we assuming that it exists?
No. We can demonstrate consciousness. We can demonstrate with a toddler. If you put or with a monkey for that matter, you can put a red dot on the forehead, and you will see that they are conscious of themselves. And that is what consciousness is. So you can demonstrate this. You can go and tell a monkey, look, if you help the other guy, then you will benefit in the long term. And monkeys who have never read the Quran will understand this concept and will act accordingly. So there's a lot of experiments, there's a lot of tests, there's a lot of research going on in this area. The only thing that we cannot do is like there's three areas. We cannot get to the origin of the universe, the origin of life, and the origin of consciousness. Those are three areas where we can't go yet.
Three origins. Or did you mention four different origins? Okay, well, somebody can argue that what you described is evidence of self-awareness, but not necessarily consciousness.
What is the difference?
Consciousness and self-awareness, I don't know, maybe on a scientific level there isn't a difference, but maybe in a theological, we would differentiate between consciousness and self-awareness.
Okay, now try the same for a soul.
We'll say that again.
Now do the same for a soul.
A soul?
Uh-huh.
Okay. I mean, well, would we rely on theology, or we would just try to attempt to
demonstrate it? Is it possible to demonstrate a soul?
I mean, it would be harder to demonstrate a soul, but you could tell when a person dies, and when a person is alive. It's like the person ceases to live. So maybe us trying to understand the cessation of living, as we identify the soul leaves. If that makes sense.
No, that doesn't make sense.
No, well, yeah, well, I just said, like, when a person stops being alive. Well, you probably would say that a living person doesn't have a soul. If I'm not mistaken, right?
There is no such thing as a soul. It has never been demonstrated.
So you wouldn't say a living person has a soul. So that it's
correct.
Okay.
I'm saying there is no such thing. So that includes any living or dead or whatever person. There is no such thing as a soul. It has never been demonstrated. So yeah.
Would you draw a line between soul and consciousness?
Yes, of course. They are two very, very different, separate, totally different things. The one can be demonstrated, the other one can't.
Is it a possibility that ancient people wouldn't draw a distinction between these two?
They wouldn't know, no. Well, how can they know?
Yeah, so maybe the consciousness distinction between the soul is a modern understanding.
Well, almost everything is. Come on.
Fair enough. Yeah, I'm just trying to say that what we consider as a consciousness and soul and spirit, ancient people, therefore ancient writings and scripture, did not differentiate.
And?
Well, we could be speaking about the same thing. So you
no,
can't.
We can't.
Why can't we not?
Because consciousness is something that we can demonstrate, and the soul is something we can't.
Yeah, Smart Cat, just a question for you, if I may. Whenever I ask people what is a soul or what is a spirit or whatever the case is, it's one of two things. Either they want to say that it's something that we haven't yet discovered in some way, or they want to conflate it with consciousness. Those are the two things that I would normally get. So what is your position? Do you think the soul and consciousness are synonymous, or do you think that consciousness, as Stops has pointed out, is separate from a soul?
Well, like I said, I think in the ancient sense, like the consciousness and the soul are seen as, one and the other. They're seen as the same thing. Maybe just using a different word to describe the same thing. I mean, unless I'm 100% wrong, and somebody can demonstrate the ancient people talked about a consciousness which was separate from a soul, then I would withdraw.
Why would we care about what the ancient people said? We know a lot more than ancient people, so we're not going to refer to the ancient people unless they've got some truth that we haven't yet discovered, or that they've discovered before us and we've demonstrated to be the case. So appealing to ancient people isn't going to be particularly effective to potentially myself or Stops or most people, right? So why would we care what ancient people think? We want to understand what the best representation of reality is. And if you think there is a soul, then can you tell us what it is and how exactly does it interact with your physical body?
Well, I think it's not fair to discount what ancient people thought about these things. I mean, yeah, they had some things that they probably did that was wrong, but they also did things that are very remarkable, and we should give credit where credit is due. I mean, ancient Greek society invented democracy, and it seems to work very well. Having said that, I know it's two different forms of democracy, but I mean, I don't think it's fair to discount ancient people just because they're ancient. I mean, we should. No, I'm not saying you guys said that, but I'm just saying, we should consider them.
Can you just tell us, though, Smart Cat, what you think a soul is and how it interacts with the body?
It's very difficult to tell you what a soul is. I mean,
your mic has gone funny. Just come closer to your mic.
Here's the thing. It's an experienced phenomenon.
I can't hear you.
Hello?
Smart Cat, we can hardly hear you. You've done something with your mic. Just reattach your mic.
Something's wrong.
How about now?
There we go. You're better now. You're back again.
Well, I think I don't remember who said this, but I think it was one or the other. But you said I could be conflating the consciousness with the soul, but the opposite could be true. You guys could be conflating the soul with the consciousness. Well, so that's what
but do we have any reason to think that's true? From an atheist point of view, we don't. If there was evidence that there was something separate from consciousness that was maybe non-material or whatever the case is, or if it is material, then obviously in principle we could establish what that is. If it's non-material and we can't demonstrate it, then I think we're on firm footing to be skeptical that such a thing exists.
If you look at how the ancient people described a soul and how modern people describe consciousness, the lines are very much blurred. So maybe scientists or materialists are appropriating something that can be demonstrated for our argumentation, but they relabel it as a scientific physical phenomenon. But maybe
I reject your claim. I reject your claim that in the old days this was conflated.
But there's an easy way to check this as well, Smart Cat. Do you think that consciousness ceases at the time humans die?
Do I think consciousness ceases?
Yes.
I don't think consciousness ceases because I don't think a soul ceases.
So who's conflating it? Excellent question.
No, because like I was trying to explain earlier, my view of consciousness and soul is similar to the ancients. They're not differentiated. If anything, consciousness is a modern day usage of what the ancients would describe as a soul.
So what is a soul?
A soul is the word that we describe experience. Encompass it in your being. It's the thing that we experience. The vehicle of experience is what the soul is.
I'm sorry.
Notice what you did there, right? Yeah, Stops asked a good question. What you had to do was explain it. And if I said we have wu, to me, the word soul is synonymous with wu. It gives me no explanatory power, and it has no, it just doesn't have any explanatory power. So whether I say, hey, everybody's got some wu, or hey, everybody's got a soul, it's to me, I can use the same word and it has equally valueless, baseless meaning to it, because you've now got to explain what it is. When we talk about consciousness, I ask anybody, what is consciousness? Depending on what they are, they'll say something like it's the first person experience. If we look at it from neurology, it seems to be correlated very tightly with the brain. You damage the brain, consciousness is affected. So there's good reasons to think that consciousness is directly connected to the brain in some way that we've yet to discover. And so that part of it, at least there's a correlation there. That part does seem to be relatively straightforward in that sense. But in any other sense, I don't know what a soul is. And when you start to explain it, then I could have used the word wu, or I could have inserted any other word there, and it would give me exactly the same amount of information, which is to say none in and of itself. You have to explain it. So why even use it?
By the way, I think Shabir got heard about this, and he got his buddies. We've already got 5 thumbs down. So please, everybody, give us a thumbs up so that we don't die here. Sorry, Smart Cat, go.
No worries. Okay. Well, it's not fair for me to say that the creation of the universe didn't happen and the creation of the consciousness didn't happen. Because I don't have the words to describe it. Just because of something being inevitable to describe doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So it's almost like I give you a ruler and I ask you to measure a mountain. You tell me that the instrument of measurement is not sufficient for the object of what you're trying to measure. So I understand where you're coming from, but you have to look at it from a more open-minded position of the possibilities that you could be overlooking, because you are not analyzing it using the right faculties. And I'm not saying you're lacking in faculties. I'm just saying you're not seeing it in a different light.
What light should we be seeing it in?
There are some things inevitable. You can't explain it. You don't have the right words or terminology to explain it, but it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So, and this can be...
Okay, that's fine. I understand that point of it. If you can't explain something in nuanced terms, that's fine. But I don't think that you can explain it in any way. So it's not just that you can't explain it in some nuanced way. Explain it to me in some way that is intelligible. And it doesn't include consciousness. Because the moment you say it's synonymous with consciousness, the immediate thing I'm going to say to you is, well, then just use the word consciousness. Why would you use the word spirit or soul? Because there's no explanatory power, and there is with consciousness. So why conflate the two or put the two together? Just say consciousness. Now we know what we're talking about. But you want to say that there's something else, because if you say consciousness, an atheist is going to agree with you. But you want to say there's something else. So if you're saying consciousness, then that's not going to help your case. You have to say something else. And if you are going to say something else, then you need to explain at least to some level, some intelligible level, what that is, broad strokes, without even going into the nuance.
Well, it's a very difficult task, and I'm not going to pretend that I can do this. But I know. But one thing what I take in consideration is the possibilities. Okay, just because I know in minute detail how an RC car is manufactured doesn't mean I know how to make a real car. So it's the same thing. Just because we know some things doesn't mean we know everything. And just because we know things in minute detail doesn't necessarily mean we know the big picture. So the thing about the soul, the origin of the universe, origin of consciousness, there's words that are unable to describe, because it goes beyond consciousness. Okay, it goes beyond the beginning of the universe. So we're lacking some language, some measurements, in order to accurately describe these things. But I would like to say that people have tried, and they don't use language. They would use mystical metaphysics or experience.
No,
Experience.
come on.
Yeah, they use
No, this
experience.
is esoteric mumbo jumbo now, what you're coming up with. Come on, there's nothing substantial here. Please, come on. You can do better than that.
That's an explanation of what it is, right? In some level, you haven't explained it in any way at the moment. You've just said that it's eternal, exists beyond the universe, whatever the case is. And if it's inexplicable, why do you believe that it exists?
No. Well, first you have to. No, I'm saying you as a scientist, you need to explore the things. But you as a scientist, you have to come to the realization that your language and your tools of measurement are not sufficient to describe some things in life. Just because you cannot describe it doesn't mean it exists. And there's some things we have to reconcile with ourselves and be okay with. You know,
no. Smart cat, no. What you are doing is you're just shifting the goalposts. You're saying, well, science only handles the natural world, and so far we haven't got a soul, so it must be science that is wrong. No. If you cannot demonstrate a soul, there is no point in telling me that science is now incompetent or inadequate to go and discover a soul if there is no soul. How else are you going to demonstrate a soul if you cannot do it through science?
Well, it's because of the language and the measurements.
No. Science is not language. Science is only facts. It's data. It's the way how you explore things. How else are you going to demonstrate and find and somehow identify a soul if not through science? What other way is there?
Okay, I'm happy you mentioned data. Okay, does a program recognize its own source code?
You can write a program that does that. It's called AI, yes.
No. A program cannot recognize its own source code. The same thing if you want to attribute us as being a product of evolution and a lot of time, you know, that's essentially our source code. We can never really perceive it.
Smart Cat, you're going off on a tangent here. The point that I was trying to make is, do you have any other way of establishing something in the natural world other than science?
Yeah, it's experience. It's experience.
Okay. Experience is just what your senses can grapple with. Science is far larger than that. Experience, you cannot experience ultraviolet rays. How are you going to experience ultraviolet rays?
No, I'm sorry, but we use our senses to experience a scientific observation.
Exactly. So what we are doing is we're expanding our capabilities, our abilities.
But some experiences cannot be measured or observed.
But our experience is science. What are you talking about? This is how we experience the world, through science.
Can you measure beauty?
Yes, you can. It's 1.66423 or something.
Golden ratio is a mathematical expression.
Exactly. This is how did we find this? Through science. It's expressed through a mathematical quotient, yes.
But nobody experiences things through mathematical expressions.
It's called science. Smart Cat, you can't get around it. And you still haven't answered my question. Is there any way that you can go and establish something, anything, without using science?
If seekers of knowledge wish to enter the city of knowledge, you must enter through its gates.
You still haven't given me anything outside of science to be able to establish something in the natural world.
No, I think I did very well. I think I did
as good as
I am the victor. You atheists are the loser.
You have conquered.
Yeah, I just think that you haven't explained in any way what a soul is.
No, I'm just saying you cannot discard it because you haven't measured it. You know,
we don't know what it is. If you can explain what it is and how we could possibly even understand that it exists before we measure it, then that would be a help. At this stage, that hasn't been.
I give you a science lab and a budget. Are you going to try to find anything that will tell you if a soul exists or not?
I don't know what I'm looking for, and I'm asking you, what should I be looking for?
something that will prove the existence of a soul.
But you haven't
what is it
defined
that I'm
soul.
looking for? What is this thing that soul represents that I should be looking for?
You're the scientists. You have to determine that.
No.
No, I'm not going to
See?
look for something
You have an
that I don't think
opportunity, a
there's
budget
any
and a
reason
This is not going
laboratory.
anywhere.
You have a budget and a laboratory, but you don't want to look. Is there a problem?
Please.
What am I supposed to be looking for? I can have the biggest laboratory and budget in the world, but if I don't know what I'm looking for, what am I going to do? Just start randomly looking in the corners of the room? Am I going to look in a different dimension? What is it that I'm supposed to be looking for? If I don't know what I'm looking for, I can have $1 trillion. I'm not going to find something I don't know what I'm looking for to start with.
The other thing is, Smart Cat, you are the one who is propagating that there is such a thing. So you need to go and demonstrate it. You are propagating there's paradise, there's hell, there's a soul, there's angels, there's all these kind of things. But you have no way of demonstrating them. All you have is assertions.
Not necessarily. I wouldn't agree to that 100%. There's some things
Why not?
Because I wouldn't
show
frame
me.
it that way.
Okay, can you show me something where I am wrong? Can you demonstrate any of the things I've just mentioned?
Well, because I never used a laboratory and to look for hell and heaven and a soul.
That's not the
Okay,
question.
so
I said there is no way that anybody has ever demonstrated the existence of heaven or hell or angels or jinn or anything like that.
okay. The language is the language of ancient people. Okay, so this is
Does
the
it make
language.
it better? How does it demonstrate the existence?
Makes it easier.
No. How are
Makes
you
it
going to
accessible.
demonstrate it? Do you have anything outside of science to demonstrate it? No, you do not. You have assertions that something
We
like
have-
heaven or hell or devils or gods or something exists, but
No.
you cannot demonstrate any of them. You cannot
Okay.
even demonstrate a soul. Yet you are the one who propagates it exists, but you can't tell me what
Why-
it is, how to find it, what it is. You can't tell me anything about it. You just use the word, then you come up with, well, it's experience, it's this, and then you start waffling. Come on, Smart Cat, please, be honest.
No, I am honest. It's impossible for me to open, the gates of hell and show it to you. I never said that. And to say that I go around and propagate this thing, no, I don't propagate these things, but I do talk about them. Why? Because I think I don't propagate them. I do talk about them, but I don't propagate them. And the reason why I talk about them is the same reason why people talk about philosophy, about logic and argumentation. We use these things to discuss and experience the world and to get a better understanding of where we are and where we sit in this world.
Okay.
Now,
Smart Cat, let's move on. We're not getting anywhere. I mean, this is just going round in circles. The next question is,
But
where
you
do you get
guys will be in
morality?
big
Do
trouble.
we differ in our morality, you and I?
do me and you differ in morality?
Yes.
I don't have any scientific data to substantiate that.
This is not scientific. This is emotional.
Huh?
This is
As far as I
emotional.
can tell, me and you could be on the same morality playing field.
How
Unless
come?
you give me a reason that I can't trust you with $5, I haven't seen that yet.
Okay, so how come?
You haven't displayed anything to me thus far that would indicate to me that you're untrustworthy. Because
Okay, how come?
morality is a system that reinforces trust and stuff like that. You know what it is.
How come?
Maybe you're very sneaky. I don't know how come. I haven't seen it yet.
Okay. Do you think that morality? Do you think that slavery is okay?
I don't think chattel slavery is okay. I don't think any form of slavery is okay.
I don't think that any form of slavery is okay. How come we can agree on these things when in Islam the message is totally different?
Stops, do you want to go that route, or do you want to press it on whether he has objective morals? Do you want to go down the route of
No. This is the
whether his morals
next
are good?
step. I first want to get some basics and then go objective, because if you go
Right.
objective first, then you're stuck on the word objective. I want to do it the other way around.
Okay.
Okay, so there's themes of master and disciple. and the disciple becomes the master, and the master becomes the disciple. So there's lots of themes within Islamic thought along these trends, but they are conflated with master and slave. So
the question is, how come that you and I can agree that any form of slavery is not okay?
Look, slavery, which from my understanding involves coercion and violence to maintain, unless there's a different form of slavery I'm unaware of. But if we're talking about the type of slavery where it requires chains, coercion, and violence to maintain the system, societal, governmental, cultural, whatever you want to call it, this type of slavery is immoral.
So why do we agree?
Because, why do we agree? Because we know it to be true. If I own
why?
a human
How can we know this?
Okay, why did Moses, who was born in the court of Pharaoh, did not appreciate the Jews being whipped? Because
why do you and we both agree that slavery is not okay when we have very, very different foundations?
No, this is a principled foundation. Do you want me to take you as a slave?
Why do we agree? I mean, you are a Muslim. Islam propagates slavery, very, very definitely. And I am somebody who rejects it. I've never had anybody say to me that slavery is okay. So we have very different outlooks, very different foundations. Our fundamentalist approach to slavery ought to be different, but it is not. How come?
I don't understand. I don't understand what you're trying to say. But all I know
you're
is that
a Muslim. You're a Muslim, and Islam propagates slavery.
If you own any slaves, I don't know about.
No. That's not this. Smart cat. No, listen. You are a Muslim. Islam propagates slavery. I am not a Muslim. How can we agree that slavery is bad?
That's not true. Islam encourages people to free slaves.
Where does it say, please free slaves?
There's many things in our tradition and scriptures that encourages people to free slaves.
And there are more telling people that you should keep sex slaves, you should rape them, you could do with them whatever you want to. So if Muhammad himself went and enslaved, traded slaves, sold slaves, bought slaves, did everything with slaves, where does it say that you should free slaves? It does not say this anywhere. It is a good thing to go and free a slave if it is a believing slave.
No, I wouldn't agree with that.
I know that you don't agree with that.
No, from a Muslim who is familiar with Quran and Hadith, there's many things you are excluding. It would be as preposterous.
Listen, Smart cat. No, I understand that there are sentences which go and they say it's a nice thing to go and free a slave. But there are more sentences which tell you what to do with slaves, how to go about keeping slaves, and what you are allowed to do with slave. The slave is a slave, the master is the master, and the master will never be the same as the slave. That's a very, very strict sentence. And there is a rule, there's actually a caste system where you have the man, the free man, then you have the slave, and then you have the woman. So there are lots of sentences in the Quran which propagate slavery.
Sorry, are you saying that a free woman is still beneath that of a enslaved man? Or did I misunderstand you just now?
That's what the Quran says.
So you're saying in the Quran that a freed woman is still beneath that of an enslaved man?
That's what the Quran says, yes.
Wouldn't you agree with me and say that?
We're going into the things. The point that I'm trying to make is, how come that you and I can agree on this when our outlook, when our foundation is so different? I don't have slavery in my life. No. You have to defend slavery. You have to defend. Yeah, but it also says you can free slaves. How did they get the slaves in the first place?
There were slaves. People take slaves all the time.
Why?
People take slaves today.
Why?
Because You talk to them. They have to account for their deeds.
Yeah, but hang on. You think that God creates everything. So your creator God creates human beings to be slaves.
No. You're doing too
so
much.
They're not
jumping.
created by
You're
a God.
doing too
Okay,
much
everybody
jumping.
is created for a God by a God except for the slaves.
No.
They are created by somebody else.
You're doing too much jumping. You're jumping from one conclusion to another conclusion. First you're insinuating that Muslims take slaves and want to enslave people, and then they want to free them. You're creating a false paradigm. This is not anywhere near what the truth is. The truth is to free slaves and not to take slaves. But you are saying the opposite because it fits your narrative. And that's
So why
not
did
happening.
Muhammad take slaves?
Because he was living in a society that took slaves in war.
Exactly.
Yes.
There you have it. So your outlook and my outlook is different. How can we agree?
What do you mean? My outlook and your outlook is different. I don't understand. Look, all I know is today, right now, are you going to take slaves? This is all I care about. Are you going to take slaves right now in 2021?
No.
Okay. Am I going to take slaves? No.
Okay.
So how is our outlook different?
Exactly. So if I say that I do not want slaves, you don't want slaves, is it objectively true that slavery is bad?
Yeah, taking slaves is bad. It's not. It doesn't
Is
take.
it objectively true?
Yes, it's objectively true. Taking slaves is bad.
So why does God then allow the taking of slaves?
Because this is what the people were doing.
No. The Quran says if you cannot afford to take a wife, go and marry a slave. That's what it says. Is the Quran not valid today?
The slave, it's valid. It's valid, but we
there
are.
You go. So no. It doesn't say that you should not marry a slave. It says you should marry a slave.
Okay, hold on. If you cannot marry a free woman, marry a slave. Yeah. Where in any society advocates for such a thing? There's a complete segregation between master and slave, like you said, in every other society. So there's something else.
There is only one society where this is still valid, and that is in Islam. No other society has this rule. Only Islam has this.
First, find me a person who.
It's not the person, it's the ideology.
Find me a person today who prefers to marry a slave over a free woman.
It is the ideology, not the person.
Well, so you think the ideology will create the conditions for?
Correct. So you said it is objectively true to not keep slaves, and yet Islam propagates slavery. So we have a problem between the objective morality of keeping slaves and the subjective keeping of slaves. And I can find lots of examples where this is also true. And that is why, and then I'm going to drop this, then give Rob a chance to talk to you about this, where I say that we have some objective rules which are correct irrespective of the human mind, which will be correct, but 99% is subjective. And that is something that I can argue.
No problem. You can argue that. But when people start taking slaves all around you, okay, what are you going to say then? What are you going to say then?
No, I just established it's wrong.
Okay, all right. So do unto others what you would want them to do unto you.
Don't take slaves. That is the point that I'm making. It's the people and not the ideology. That was my whole point.
Yeah, but to attribute slavery to ideology is wrong. Because slavery, the problem with slavery.
It's unfortunately the case.
No,
I'm going to leave it now. Rob, you jump
in. People take slaves. People take slaves. There's no ideology that will possess you to take a slave. But you, as a human being, as a conscious human being, you make that call to take the slave. Okay, so that's the condemnable part. It's not the ideology telling you to do it and then you do it. You do it at the end of the day. And we're fortunate enough to live in a society where it would be very difficult to convince people otherwise. So you have to also take that in consideration. Why did God create a society today where nobody wants to take a slave?
It's about the ideology.
You asked me earlier, why did God create a society where people take slaves if slavery is wrong? Okay,
No, I said, why did God create slaves?
Where there's no slaves taking.
I said, why? I asked, why did God create slaves?
All of us are slaves
No,
to God.
come on. No, don't do that.
Yeah, but hold on. So,
No, don't do that.
we're
Please
all
don't do
slaves
that.
to God. But we create the slaves amongst each other. We're the one that enslaves one another, not God.
Okay. Rob, can you take over?
Yeah, I wasn't sure where we were going with that one. I was going to be down that route. He's not going to agree that any of those things are immoral. I think you made the other point, though, Smart Cat, is you suggested there was good reasons to think that Islam provides objective morality. So what do you mean by objective morality?
I mean, so maybe some of your viewers, and I'm pretty sure you gentlemen as well, you're aware of the code of Hammurabi. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. All right. So if I told you that this is objective morality, I would hope that you would protest. Okay. So because this is retributive morality. Okay. This is all about retribution, and it has nothing to do with objective morality. First, objective morality needs to be defined, and we need to stay in those parameters. So I can't tell you 100% what objective morality is, because I haven't experienced or studied every possible moral dilemma a person may find themselves in. But there are some things where you just know is the right thing to do, and then there are some things you just know that are the wrong things to do. And this is the closest thing that I want to talk about, objective morality. It's something that is inherently, it speaks to us, and its goodness or in the lack of its goodness.
Okay, so do you think that objective morality is a fact of the matter, like a rock existing? Do you think it's some sort of fact that floats out there in the world that is discoverable, or do you think that it is subject to human beings or indeed human minds?
No. Okay. I would define objective morality as something that does not harm people and harm yourself. Like if you do a decision that harms, and it's very hard to say because I'm thinking about defense or war. Well, how the lines are blurred. But let's just keep it as a civil like a community setting. If you're living in a community, don't do anything harmful to your neighbors, right? And don't harm yourself. So that's what I would that's what I would define as objective. So there are subjective
Your opinion,
things,
or does that come from some other source?
I think that mainly comes from experience.
And people who have a different experience to you and say their experience is objective, how do you tell them that they are mistaken?
Okay, if I talk to, for example, let's just say this is a very extreme example. If we catch a serial murderer, and we all know that murdering multiple people is wrong, but he finds pleasure in it, he's the only one that finds pleasure in it, and it's safe to say that this individual faculties, there's something off about him. So he cannot be misconstrued or even be labeled as a normal human being. So it would be, for example, I don't want, it's not like we're special, but let's just say me and you are normal and other people are normal. There are some things that speak to us inherently in goodness and in badness. And it's something that speaks for itself, right?
Yeah,
so that's what.
So are you saying, hang on a moment, you're saying different things here. Are you saying that if the majority of people think something is wrong, then it's objectively wrong? Or are you saying that there's some other standard by which you could tell the murderer that he's wrong? Is it just that it's most people that think he's wrong? or is it something else that you can appeal to show him he's wrong?
I would say like if you you have to be very particular. It's very difficult to do generalizations. So if you can give if you give me a particular example, we can evidently both of us immediately know what the wrong thing and the right thing to do. So
Sure. I'll give you an example. Human stem cell research. Human stem cell research. Is that right or wrong?
100% right.
How did you establish that?
Now, I know you're being tricky. If you're trying to say, oh, that's being harvested from aborted babies, then that's wrong. But if we can ethically extract stem cells and research them, then that's right.
I'm just asking you how you established either one case is right or how one case is wrong.
Okay, I'll tell you. Is it okay to venture into a cave and out of curiosity and know what's inside that cave?
I'm waiting for you to tell me how you discover that something is wrong objectively.
Okay, all right. So in terms of research, I don't think research is wrong. I think research is right. Do research. Okay, now you put a stem cell in front of research. Okay, the research part trumpets, the stem cell. Unless you say, well, those stem cells were taken from an aborted baby, then I would say, that's obviously wrong.
How did you establish it's obviously wrong?
You had to harm a defenseless, unborn, potential human being to acquire those stem cells.
How did you establish that that is wrong objectively?
You do not feel that it is a wrong thing to do?
I'm asking how you establish it. If the murderer says that it's right, or the scientist says it's right, or somebody says it's right, and they believe it's the case, how do you argue that they are mistaken?
This is cheesy, but my heart tells me that this is the wrong thing to do.
Okay, therefore, but they can say the same thing, and their heart tells them that it's the right thing to do. How do you establish that their heart is incorrect and your heart is correct?
Under what conditions? It cannot be the same. It cannot be the exact same where my heart says wrong and his heart says right, and we're both
I agree. One of you has to be right and one of you has to be wrong. How do you establish, what is the methodology by which you would say to the other person they are wrong? You can't just appeal to your heart because they can do the same thing. So what else are you going to appeal to show them that they are mistaken?
Just because they appeal to their heart, one of our heart has to be sick or not functioning. That's what you can say. But one thing for sure, only one person would be right in the same circumstance, taking opposite decisions, polar opposite decisions.
How do you establish which person is correct? What's that methodology to establish that?
You need more information. You need more context and you need more information. And then you'll be able to establish it.
Let's say you get more context and more information. How do you tell the other person they are mistaken?
How do I tell them?
Yeah.
Well, I would need more than one person to agree with me.
Okay, so it's an appeal to popularity. If more people side with you, then it's objectively correct. Is that how you want to argue?
No, I wouldn't say that. Because obviously when I said my heart wasn't good enough.
Your mic has gone. Your mic has gone again.
Okay, how about now?
No, it's still bad.
How about now?
It's a little better, but it's not as good as what you had it.
How about now?
No, it's not so good now.
How about now?
Just speak a little bit more.
I'm just gonna hop out. I'll come back.
To be honest, Stops, I think we can bring it to a close here. I don't think we're going to sort of get anywhere here. He doesn't sort of understand the problem that he's in here. So either he's appealed to some sort of intuition or he's appealing to the majority. Neither of those are objective. And if he wants to use that as objective, then somebody else can do the same. And that, of course, would be self-defeating. So I just don't feel like he's able to really argue this. There are other Muslims that can attempt to do this, right? And then we can go down the Euthyphro route, but I think we're not even there here at the moment.
Now, I tried a different route today, but what do you think is the best way to really address this morality issue?
I think the morality thing is, okay, just SmartCat, just let's see if we can hear you.
Hello.
Yeah, that's better. Stops. I think, to me, we have to get clear on what objective means to a Muslim. If they can't be clear on what that is, then I'm just going to outright deny that they've got objective morality and say they need to come back when they can understand what it is they're talking about. Because if they don't understand, we're not going to understand. And if they are going to put forward some sort of clear methodology by which they can establish something as objectively moral, then we can have that decision. Because either one of two things are going to be the case. Either they're going to try and appeal to God, and then we can go that route, or they're not going to appeal to God and do it some other route, but then we can also claim to have that same objectivity. So I think whichever way they go, it's going to be problematic, unless they just say there isn't objective morals. But most Muslims say there is. So for me, it's always about what does it mean to be objective, and let's see whether you can hold to your own standard. If you lower the bar, then that means that atheists can also have it without God. And if you're going to appeal to God, then we can go the Euthyphro route, and we'll see how well that works.
And speaking of which, I don't know if you see in the chat, that's the Euthyphro dilemma has some responses, but they are incredibly weak, because if you go and follow this one that it's not God's essence, then you are faced with the same dilemma once again. What is the essence? How do you know that the essence is good, or whether this is good so that the essence is good? So it doesn't change anything. You're just pushing it one sort of block further down the line, but it's still the same dilemma. So this so-called solution, or the so-called refutation, is not a refutation. It's an illusion.
It falls to exactly the same thing. The common way that it's explained is God wills something because He is good. But then the question is simply, what are the good-making properties of God good because He possesses them, or does He possess them because they are good? And whichever way you go there's problems as well. So, yeah, I don't feel like there's been a necessary answer. But with SmartCat, he hasn't been able to articulate what he means by objective. And unless we can do that, we can't sort of go any further. But I think it is getting late now anyway. I've got work tomorrow and school and all the rest of it for the kids.
But it was very interesting, I must say.
Yeah, I think if we want to continue, then obviously Discord is the place. I'll just post the Discord link here again.
Okay, it's a bit late for me. But SmartCat, thank you very much. You've really added, and it was very interesting to hear your opinion on these things when we're listening to Shabir and the other people. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you indeed, SmartCat. There's the Discord server. I'm going to be going to bed, but if you want to join us in Discord, there's the server. It's in the link in the text there. Feel free to come and join. There might be some people there now. Stops and I probably won't. Maybe SmartCat will hop in. Otherwise, we'll be back probably on Friday with the Gin and Tonic show. So my thanks to SmartCat. My thanks to all of you for viewing. And we'll be back with another video. Send us a link if you've got something that you'd like us to review. And when Stops and I've got time, then we'll get to do that.
Have a good night. Have a good morning. And I will catch you guys when you least expect it. I'm talking about you now.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.